Today's recipe calls for juice. I'm going to show you how to make homemade gummy worms. This recipe only takes 3 to 4 ingredients, so they come together really easy and they're super simple. This is part of our comfort food series. Of course, this is candy, but nonetheless, it has some comfort vibes to it. So with that said, let's get started. The first thing we're going to do in a medium-sized saucepan is add 1/3 cup of juice of your choice, 2 teaspoons of granulated sugar, and 2 tablespoons of honey. You can also use agave or maple syrup if you choose. It's really up to you. Then we're going to bring this mixture up to a boil over medium-high heat. Should take about 3 to 4 minutes. In the process, we want to dissolve all the honey and sugar into our juice. You can use any type of juice of your choice. You can make multiple flavors of gummy worms. Today we're only making 2. So I use 2 different fruit juices for this recipe. The first one is a white grape juice, and the second one is a blueberry pomegranate juice. There's so many options like apple juice, grape juice, black cherry, pomegranate. It's really up to you. I ended up using 100% fruit juice concentrate, the stuff that you can find in the freezer aisle. This worked out perfect. I found this to be more cost effective. You get a higher yield of juice for a lot less money, which means you have more opportunity to make more gummy worms or just have some juice for the house. And this way it was 100% fruit juice, so I didn't have to worry about buying something that had a ton of sugar already added to it. Then you want to give your pot the occasional stir to stir up the sugar and honey so it dissolves a little bit quicker into your fruit juice. So I'm going to show you a pretty cool trick so that you can have 2 different colored gummy worms. All you're going to do is make some gummy worms, throw them in the fridge, let them completely set up and solidify. Then you're going to grab a spoon or a butter knife, something that's not too sharp because you don't want to cut your mold, and you're going to cut your gummy worms right in half. Now that you have your gummy worms cut, all you're going to do is get underneath the mold and start pushing up against the mold. Since it's silicone, it'll give and you're able to pull out your gummy. And you're going to take 1/2 out and leave the other half in. And the 1/2 that you take out, you're just going to put it in another mold. It's fairly simple. I alternated and left the head and moved the tail down, or vice versa, left the tail and moved the head over to a different mold. You can totally skip this step if you want. You don't have to do 2 different colored gummy worms, but it is pretty cool the way they come out. And here's a bit of a closer look of what it looks like to pop out your gummy worms. You're going to use the same exact method to completely pop out your gummy worms at the end once they completely solidify and set up. I went ahead and skipped that part so that I'm not going to show you that at the end of the video. So if you need any point of reference, just come back to this. Now that your honey and sugar have completely dissolved into your fruit juice, we're going to take it off the heat and let it cool down for about 2 to 3 minutes. You don't want it to completely cool down though. Next, we'll get the gelatin ready for our gummy worms. So in a separate bowl, you should have 2 tablespoons of cold water. Then we're going to pour in 1 packet or about 1 tablespoon of unflavored gelatin into our water. Then grab a spoon or a rubber spatula and start to mix the gelatin into your water. You don't want to use a whisk or a fork for this because this will create air bubbles, and then in turn the air bubbles will be in our gummy worms, and we don't want that. So completely mix in your dry gelatin into your water. You don't want any dry bits of gelatin left behind. It should start to become fairly thick in consistency, and you're doing it right if it starts to turn thick. You don't want this stuff to completely set around and completely set up because it'll make it a lot harder to stir into your fruit juice. And you should let it bloom for about 1 to 2 minutes, but stirring it in gives it enough time to completely bloom and set up. Once you have it all stirred together and it's bloomed for a few minutes, you're going to add it straight into your fruit juice. Next, you want to stir in your gelatin into your warm liquid. The liquid should be warm enough to allow the gelatin to completely melt into your fruit juice. You don't want to stir this vigorously or use a whisk to do this process, again, because that'll create air bubbles, and that's not what we want. You also want to ensure that you stir in all of your gelatin. We don't want to leave any little clumps or lumps of gelatin behind. In turn, it'll get clogged in our tool and you'll get a fat clump of gelatin in a gummy worm. So it should take about 2 to 3 minutes to completely stir in your gelatin. You'll start to notice that your liquid will start to become a little bit thicker, and that's what you want. Now that you have all of the gelatin stirred into your liquid, you're going to grab your little eyedropper tool that kind of looks like a miniature turkey baster, and you're going to fill it up with your fruit juice so you can start to fill up your gummy worm molds. You want to fill up your molds all the way to the top. This will give you a full looking gummy worm, which will be nice and aesthetically pleasing. The amount of fruit juice that we use gives us a yield of about 20 gummy worms. You can double this recipe and easily make 40 gummy worms if you choose. I got a few pro tips for you when you go to fill up your molds with your fruit juice. The first thing I found out the hard way is you want to keep your little turkey baster tool completely upright. You don't want to turn it on its side. If you turn it on its side, there's an air bubble that gets trapped inside of your tool, and once you turn it on the side, it'll come out towards the tip, of course, which will release and shoot out a bunch of that juice, which is liquid hot magma, and it could potentially burn your hand. It didn't hurt too bad. It didn't burn me that bad, but yeah, it wasn't fun. The other thing I noticed when I was making these gummy worms is once you start to completely empty out your little baster tool, small air bubbles will start to form in the tool. And if you press those out into your gummy worms, then in turn it'll make your gummy worms all airy and bubbly and ugly looking. And that's not what we want. The best way to prevent this is you can either not completely empty out your tool, and once it's quarter of the way done, you can fill it back up with more juice to avoid the air bubbles, or you can see the air bubbles have started to form and clear out the air bubbles inside of your pot by just squeezing out the air and any juice that was left in it. This way it'll prevent any air bubbles from forming and sticking to your gummy worms. If you do start to get air bubbles on the top of your gummy worms, you can easily use your little turkey baster and suck up the air bubbles to get rid of them. I tried using my fingers to pop them, but then it starts to stick to your fingers and it just doesn't work very well. If you don't have a tool like this, I'm sure you can order one online or use a large turkey baster, or use a measuring device to pour your liquid into your molds, like a measuring cup that has the spout on it, or even use a flexible cup that you can fold to make the spout to pour it in. So burn through and fill all of your molds up, and then remember you want to completely fill up the molds so that you get a full gummy worm.
Alright, now that we got the molds made, we're going to throw them in the fridge for about 30 minutes so they can completely set up. In the meantime, I think I'm going to go play the Nintendo 64, so we'll see you here in a few.
Now that our gummy worms have had time to set up and solidify in the fridge, this is what they came out looking like. They came out really awesome, and there's really not a great way to plate these, so yeah.
Alright, now that our gummy worms have completely set up, let's give them a shot. First thing though, I recommend that you keep these in an airtight container in the fridge. This will help prevent them from molding because they don't have all the preservatives and all that other junk to prevent that from happening, because those things will last for like 50 million years. And this will help them from not liquefying, because if it gets too hot then they'll liquefy because it's just jello. So I really recommend that you put them in the fridge. Of course they're not going to last long because you're going to eat them really fast, but you know, just good practice. So let's check them out. They're nice and jiggly. A lot jigglier than the stuff that you buy at the store, and they kind of look like something that you'd find in a fishing tackle box because they're all super jiggly, something like a night crawler. And the color on them came out really good. I went with that blueberry pomegranate, and oddly enough it kind of actually looks like the color of a worm, which is pretty cool and crazy. And then the ones with the two different colors came out really great. Definitely looks like the ones that you'd find in a store that you'd always eat when you were kids. So let's give them a shot. These things came out really good, and they're definitely not too sweet like the store-bought ones, so you can crush a ton of these and not feel so bad. They're nice and sweet from that honey, but then that fruit from the fruit juice kind of creeps up and gives us a nice balance between the sweetness and the fruitiness, which is perfect. Then the texture on them came out super gummy and chewy like a gummy candy should be. I would definitely take these over store-bought any day. Alright, that's it for today's video. This recipe is insanely easy. There's not a whole lot to it. I think the hardest part of this entire recipe is having patience to wait for these things to completely cool and set up before you eat them. You can mix and match and do any combination of your favorite juices to make your favorite gummy worm, which is awesome. And this recipe is really easy, so it'd be perfect to make with the kids, especially right around Halloween time. That'd be a lot of fun. So hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Thanks for watching. I'm gonna go watch some Magic School Bus and stuff my face full of these gummy worms, so we'll see you on the next one. Now that we have our, not snakes, the worms. To make these, you can use any combination of fruit juices of your favorite choice, which is terrible English. Too sweet, which is awesome because I don't want really that much sugar. And jiggly, they're kind of like not very bouncy though. And that you keep these in the fridge in an airtight drinks for this video. Off to the moon. A little fun fact for you. If you throw these gummy worms at the window, it'll stick, which is pretty funny, and apparently I'm still immature. I accidentally tripped and one stuck to the window. Now I have some windows to clean, so if you do try it, make sure you have some stuff to clean the windows, but it's definitely worth it. Just throw it, give it a shot. It's pretty funny.